Hello and welcome to another episode of World Beyond Belief. My name's Paul Marco, and we're privileged to have with us again Eric Karlstrom. Now, this is really an important interview because he's going to talk about a subject that's, it's off the radar for most people in the world, but it's an incredibly important subject, and it's increasing in importance as time goes by. It's the topic of Gangstalking. So here we are with Eric, and we're going to start talking. I'm going to pretty much give him the floor because he's a very experienced lecturer, and he knows how to put together thoughts and run things together. So I'm going to try to stay out of as much as I can, but ask questions that I think you might be wanting to ask. So here we are. Welcome to the World Beyond Belief, Eric.
Thank you, Paul. It's always nice to have a chance to visit with you and talk about things that we think are very important. And,
yes.
And let me just, if you don't mind, I'll just give a little background of myself so that people know where I'm coming from. I got my master's in 1977, University of Wyoming, in physical geography, my PhD in 1981 in physical geography, specializing in soils, landforms, and climate. And then I went on to teach at 3 universities for 30 years. So I went up through the ranks of assistant professor, associate professor, full professor, and left California State University Stanislaus in 2011. But I've been pretty busy with my 4 websites ever since. I've got 4 websites, and they are 911nwo.com, naturalclimatechange.us, waterwatchalliance.us, and erickarlstrom.com, which is my for fun music site because I've always loved playing music, guitar, banjo, and piano. So that one's more or less an attempt at a commercial site. The other 3 are educational sites. They're really meant to be digital libraries of information for people to consult. Now, as I say, I was a professor for 30 years, so I would have published in, professional journals, national and international. So I know how to do research, and I know how to put together thoughts, and I know how to, write them down. And I do regard this as a service. My main topics that got me into this rabbit hole that we're living in now, I knew from my own research in climate change and climates of the past that the whole global warming thing coming out of, the United Nations and the U.S. government and other cooperating governments, I knew that was a big lie, and that this is a fraudulent claim in order to usher in, huge carbon taxes, trillions of dollars a year, and usher in the UN as global government, and also meant as a cover for geoengineering and weather warfare, which, billions have gone into that over the last 5 decades or so, federal monies. And so all that's on my naturalclimatechange.us website, which is now being updated so that my own professional papers are on there, as well as those of my father and many, many, many PowerPoints from professionals at various conferences, like the International Conference on Climate Change, which was held in 2008 and 2009. My other big topic is 911, another huge government-sponsored fraud.
Yeah.
And that's what my 911nwo.com website is dedicated to investigating. And that's been going on, that's probably over 11 or 12 years old. I keep updating it. And our last interview, I think, was pretty important. We talked about the 46 plus drills that the Air Force and NATO and the UN and all kinds of cooperating agencies were doing on the day of 9/11 and before, which mimicked exactly the characteristics of the Operation 911. Everything from hijackers and hijacked planes to it's all on my website too. It's on our interview that is posted on your site, and then I've got an article about that as well. Okay, so those are my 2 big entry points to what I would have to call now criminal government. We have criminal government, lawless.
Yes.
Maybe criminal syndicate or internesting criminal syndicates is an accurate way to look at it.
Yeah.
Now, just when you think things are bad, then there's gangstalking and or organized gangstalking. Other names for it are counterintelligence stalking, there's a number of names: community stalking, vigilante stalking, in which all kinds of civilian spies are enlisted, often by local police, often by handlers of various kinds, in order to target individuals who are designated as, well, who knows, you can get on these lists in a number of ways to become a targeted individual. Could be that you're a whistleblower. That's very common. In other words, a way to neutralize people and eventually destroy the lives of people who are questioning the system. So perhaps it comes as no surprise then, with my history, I might myself be a targeted individual. And in fact, that's the case. So I can speak from academic research experience, and I can also speak from personal experience on this. And this is a very unsavory topic, because the goal of these community spying networks is to neutralize, discredit, ultimately destroy individuals that the state deems as problematic. So it's really a disposal system for citizens. Now, this becomes outrageous when you consider that the United States government was founded to protect the rights of American citizens and American citizens' private property rights, etc. And now you have elements within the government, including Department of Homeland Security, which was formed right after 9/11, who are coordinating efforts that go right up to the top of our government, come right down to the local police, and indeed, if you research it, in fact, connects with the satanic networks of the world, which are really the underbelly of our world, the Illuminati bloodlines being the top. Now, they're never seen, but they are often the unseen hand coordinators of these programs. Now, these programs have real legs, these citizen spy programs. And let me just mention for your viewers that it's possible to get an idea of what's going on here simply by watching some movies. There's an excellent movie called The Lives of Others, which really tells the true story of the secret police, the Stasi police in East Germany during the Cold War, when you had an enormous, 1 out of 6 members of the civilian population was enlisted by the state police to spy on other civilians. And again, the targets would include artists and intellectuals and people who are potential problems. Now, in this movie, The Lives of Others, you see a case of that. You see both sides. You see the spies who are monitoring, bugging the apartments of in this case, the targeted individual is a playwright who's considered dangerous because he's smart and he can write plays. Right. When in fact he's kind of supportive of the East German government, but that doesn't matter. But anyway, so you see it from both sides. And what is fascinating is that the East German Stasi police system really comes out of the Soviet Union Cheka police. Again, the same idea. How does a totalitarian government control things on the street? Well, you have this cooperation between citizen spies, citizen snitches, who are often motivated by a little bit of money, or maybe they're given a break on a criminal charge that the police have against them. In other words, you cooperate with us, we'll cooperate with you. And so you get a whole network, incredibly organized, vertically integrated network in which many citizens, often ex-military, often ex-police, often military, often police, often civilians, often bottom feeders. These would be what we call the perpetrators, who actually are carrying out the gangstalking operations against the TIs, who are the targeted individuals. And normally this involves at first a few years of surveillance so that the targeted individual or the TI doesn't even know that they're being targeted. But they are getting, the perpetrators, the hierarchy there is getting a psychological profile on the individual so that they can figure out how best to push their buttons, harass them, get them to get pushed over the edge so they will act out. For instance, if they were to commit a crime against, one of their gang stalkers or commit suicide. There's a lot of material on this on the web. I would tell your readers. A lot of people are speaking out about this. So there's a lot of targeted individuals who have access to the same technology that you and I do, who are putting their stories on the internet. And I would suggest, first of all, okay, the movies are great. Another one's called The Game with Michael Douglas, which is quite old, but actually gives you the idea of how these community spying networks would work to take a very, very rich individual. In this case, Michael Douglas plays a millionaire or billionaire in San Francisco. They completely break him down psychologically. They take all his money, they take his home, and they get him to kill his brother. Through these very skillful uses. Now, this is really coming out of not only the Soviet Cheka and the East German Stasi, but these kinds of citizen spy networks integrated with police have been used in Hungary, Poland during with the communist era there, as well as Portugal. And of course, the United States has an incredible history when you look at the FBI's counterintelligence program of the 60s and 70s. And this is COINTELPRO on steroids. Yeah. And then if you look at the CIA's MK-Ultra programs, mind control of the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, right on to today. You put these two together, MK-Ultra, CIA's MK-Ultra, with the FBI's COINTELPRO, with all this new psychological information and hardware. The technology now includes directed energy weapons,
sure,
or what they call non-lethal weapons, or slow kill, or hands-off torture. So people can be harassed electronically in their own homes. Heart attacks can be induced, and are. People are killed in this program, bottom line.
Right.
And once you are in the program, apparently wherever you go, if you go, from where I live in Colorado to Pennsylvania, your protocol follows you, and the gangstalking will continue there with the hierarchical structure that is developed there. If you go to Portugal, same thing. The United States government has spent upwards of $1 trillion on these kinds of programs, including Department of Homeland Security, and coordinating the CIA, FBI, local police since 9/11. Upwards of $1 trillion to beef up this super Gestapo, Stasi police state that we live in. Now, most Americans are so propagandized that, perhaps they're not a threat, but the genius, the diabolical genius behind this program is that the people who become perpetrators are also controlled.
Sure.
So they control not only the perpetrators, but through the perpetrators, they control and try to destroy the lives of the targeted individuals. And this can go on for years. One of the, let me just mention a couple more movies. There's The Game, there's the Lives of Others. I just saw a great movie the other day with Nicolas Cage called Seeking Justice. Came out in 2013, which very much shows the situation of gang stalking and how this can push a normally civilized individual, Nicolas Cage,
sure,
over the edge to become, it can bring out the caveman, to bring out the axe murderer in him, because you know how to push that person's buttons.
Yeah.
And another great movie in this regard is 1998, Will Smith's Enemy of the State, in which it is shown the incredible technologies that the NSA, National Security Agency, had, but even then, in 1998, in order to track, follow, neutralize, kill an enemy of the state. In this case, in the movie, Will Smith happens to be an innocent guy, and the guy that they were after had a incriminating iPhone film of a congressman or a high official who killed a congressman. So the enemy was the biologist who was filming a lake to look for birds or whatever, and he sees this murder, got it on his iPhone, and he put it in his friend's pocket. And now all of a sudden, the iPhone tracks along, and Will Smith, who was his lawyer friend, all of a sudden then inherits that role as enemy of the state.
Right.
And then the rest of the movie is Will Smith trying to survive this incredible assault coordinated from, this one individual, of course, worked high in the NSA, so he had access to all the toys and all the personnel. So those are 4 good movies. I think there's probably many more that kind of show you what's going on, but it's very real. There's probably, Department of Homeland Security spreads grants around to local police departments, and local fire, emergency responders, fire, police, ambulance people would often be enlisted to give it an air of respectability. And a lot of these perpetrators, are basically do-gooders, thinking that, oh my gosh, we got a terrorist. We've got to play ball with the powers that be. So basically, they're duped. Now remember the Stanley Milgram experiment, which we talked about earlier, which I think came from 71 or 61. It's way old. A Harvard psychology professor showed that in a controlled situation, if somebody in a lab coat, for instance, who looks authoritative and is, for instance, a doctor, will stand next to a subject who's actually being experimented on and telling him to go ahead and administer shocks to a third person behind a glass window. That third person is actually an actor, and so is the authority figure. But the subject, who has actually got a hand on the electronic controls, doesn't know that he's the subject. He just knows that the doctor, authority figure, is telling him, okay, they screwed up, give him a bigger shock. Yeah. And this goes on to, and then of course the actor down there, writhing in pain, right, and fake, but and then the authority figure says more, and 70% of the people that were tested, and this has been borne out in subsequent research, 70% of us human beings will listen to that authority figure and shock that third person party, even unto death, serious damage. So in other words, we're quite gullible. And if you go online, there's a little excellent video in which, again, there's a similar test. And a guy with, who's carrying a badge, who's not a police, but, right, he looks like he is, comes up to a young man who's, this is in California at a farmer's market or something. And he says, now that lady in there with the baby in the carriage, she stole that baby. What I want you to do is go in there and get that baby carriage and bring it up to me. When she's not looking, just grab it. And so this young man, again, he's the subject. He's got a little kid. He wants to do what's right. The guy with a badge convinces him he's a cop. He pulls this out. Right. And convinces him that she's bad. So he goes in there, he takes out the carriage. Right. And then, of course, the truth comes out, and the woman is just screaming at this actor or this subject who has just taken away her baby. So this is how, at least many people can be co-opted into participating. And ex-military guys, they're team players. I mean, I've been harassed by ex-military guys. But it's usually, lately, it's kind of, in a friendly way. But they're spies. They want to know where you're going. They want to know what you're doing. They're on their cell phones all the time and their iPads. So they're part of this communication network. And I've seen these people, so many of them, with cell phones to their ear as they're operating whatever their orders are. And usually their orders are fairly constrained. Go here, cut off this person in a car, or follow that person in a car, or in the case of a grocery store, mob that person with 8 or 10 people and say this and that. They're usually scripted. Yeah. An excellent website that people can go on to learn about this is called fightgangstalking.com. Fightgangstalking.com. And the guy who put together this website has been on both sides of it. He's been at the surveillance and perpetrator side, and he's been at the victim or TI, targeted individual side. It's very, very helpful. So if you want to get one site where you get the information, and of course, if you are a targeted individual, this information is life or death.
Sure.
Because if you don't know what's happening, you literally can be driven to suicide, as many have.
Right.
Or to act out. And again, why they want to get you to act out is so they can arrest you or put you in an institution. And since the institution and the police are in on it, generally speaking, you're better off not going to the police, and you're better off not going to a psychologist, because once they get you institutionalized, then they can throw away the key. Right. So that's part of it. So this is a very, very integrated system. Our Department of Homeland Security has a budget of upwards of 40 to 60 billion a year, has 225,000 employees, and this is all post 911. Right. And they're sprinkling around these grants, like our little tiny Saguache County here, I think got a $60,000 grant, and now we have a SWAT team, population 6,000 in a 3,000 square acre county, and we've got a SWAT team. And that's one of our commissioners is always going to the Department of Homeland Security meetings to stay on the same page, because he wants to be a good doobie. Sure. And he's too stupid to know what's going on. And I hate to, use those words, but I have a little bit of resentment here. And then another one of our public servant commissioners is going off to meet with all these representatives who want to sell the county on drones. Oh yeah, they'll do lots of good things like help map agricultural fields, And of course, this is what they use in Afghanistan and Iraq as surveillance and as weapons, So what can happen then is that these drones can be turned back against the American citizenry. Sure. And what we've seen is again a criminal government defining the citizenry of America as enemy. Right. Obviously, the government has put itself in the position of enemy. And if American people could possibly wake up and put these people in jail, we know who's behind 911. Right. We know who's behind the global warming fraud. Right. And we know who's behind the gangstalking up to the point of the bloodline Illuminati. And we know them, the Rockefellers. Right. I mean, these people should be locked away. I think give them their own continent, Antarctica, myself. Right. give them a cigarette lighter and a sleeping bag and put them there. That's the only way, because these people are so rich and powerful. But let me just go through and show you how much is underneath this. I've put out a little gang-stalking primer and gang-stalking action packet, and I put up this information in our little town of Crestone, which has an enormous number of gang stalkers, by the way, for a town of 1,500. But they come from everywhere. You see people with New Mexico plates or elsewhere. So they come in, they're part of a network, they get a phone call, go do this, fairly tightly scripted. That guy in that truck, do this. And then leave or whatever. So let me just give you a couple of the definitions that are on my gang stalking packet. Gang stalking refers to the intense, long-term, unconstitutional, it's illegal, unconstitutional, and immoral, breaks 2 of the 10 commandments, and that is, thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor, because they're always saying, well, this targeted individual is a pedophile, or he's a terrorist, or something, to get these dumb do-gooders, or just zombies, because I think some of these perpetrators, in fact, are mind control victims. That's how they pull them in. So it's long-term unconstitutional surveillance and harassment of a person who has been designated as a target by someone associated with America's security industry. Official domestic counterintelligence operations of this type are perpetrated by federal agents and private contractors, sometimes with the support of state and local law enforcement personnel. The goal in the parlance of counterintelligence agents is to, quote, subvert or neutralize an individual deemed to be an enemy or potential enemy of clients or members of the security state. Arguably, the most accurate term for this form of harassment is counterintelligence stalking. The major perpetrators of organized stalking in the U.S. are the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, U.S. military counterintelligence agencies, state and local law enforcement agency, intelligence units, I'll say that again, state and local law enforcement intelligence units, or LEIU, LEUs, and private security contractors. All of these groups and other federal intelligence agencies, such as the CIA and NSA, have well-documented histories of abusing their powers and, using human Americans as guinea pigs, et cetera. That goes way back. Okay, then citizen spies are also called surveillance role players. You get a job, you might get a new car, you might get a new house if you play ball with these people. Perpetrators of gang stalking crimes rely upon support from citizens who are, quote, useful idiots, vigilantes, and sadists. These street-level perps, a.k.a. the Fight Gang Stalking website's very cool. He calls them brown nosers. Yeah. Also known as brown nosers and cockroaches and sewer rats. I mean, these people are scum of the earth, but often they're dupes, so they're not quite scum of the earth. They're just stupid. These street-level perps, a.k.a. brown nosers, include a type of person used by East Germany's Stasi, the civilian snitch, and then the German word is, I can't pronounce it, or unofficial collaborator. Although street-level thugs used in gang stalking harassment are sometimes recruited from the ranks of criminal informants, many are just unpaid civilian minions who will do almost anything to please someone in a position of authority. For example, under the guise of assisting a, quote, neighborhood watch program or an investigation. Now, right after 911, we had all these little signs come up around Crestone, the neighborhood watch with the big eye. And now we're supposed to be on the lookout for terrorists, right, in our community of 1,500. A job announcement posted in San Diego and advertised on Craigslist was for a part-time position with an intelligence security contractor, such as InfraGard, founded by ex-FBI officials, etc. This part-time position with an intelligence security contracting firm, in other words, a private firm, for, quote, a surveillance role player. These job listings are numerous and are mainly found on the websites of defense contractors. Of course. Funny thing, U.S. defense budget increased from about $300 billion before 9/11 to about $700 or $800 billion now. And of course, we know the Air Force was instrumental in pulling off the operation. And yes, of course, I've been gang stalked by Air Force people and not retired. Right. Some of them active duty. Well, of course, they want to keep a lid on that, don't they? Sure. These job listings are numerous and are mainly found on the websites of defense contractors. You can locate them easily by performing an online search for surveillance role player job. There's also a long history of non-governmental organizations perpetrating various serious crimes against their fellow citizens. Such organizations, for example, the Ku Klux Klan and Freemasons, and by the way, various churches and school groups, have historically and communities have historically included members of the political and law enforcement community. Targets. Gangster stalking targets are American citizens deemed to be dissidents or whistleblowers and perhaps potential dissidents and whistleblowers. It should be remembered that for over 2 decades, the CIA performed secret illegal experiments on U.S. and Canadian citizens, the MK Ultra program. Oh, way over 2 decades. Those experiments include physical and psychological torture. So gang stalking tactics would include perpetual stalking, 24/7, invasion of privacy in which your house is broken into and maybe minor things are moved around just to kind of, and of course, bugging of your house and even, cameras, hidden cameras, threats, electronic harassment with these directed energy weapons, sleep deprivation, blacklisting, mobbing, black bag jobs, gaslighting. If you ever saw the movie Gaslighting. With Ingrid Bergman, that shows how that's done. Abusive phone calls, computer hacking, framing, threats, blackmail, vandalism, baiting, mimicking, street theater, in which, again, you have a group that is going to, throw out words that, they shouldn't know. They shouldn't know this about your personal life, and they'll say things like that, or they'll put you in a situation which is very uncomfortable. Blocking, cutting off, invasion of personal space, sensitization using neuro-linguistic programming. Sensitization is when the targeted individual finally figures out that he's being gangstalked. And at some point, they will make that very clear. And they intentionally do so that once you're sensitized, then each little thing, makes you kind of, oops, I'm under harassment and attack. So that's the point of that. Noise harassment, high technology noise harassment, hypersound, and very high technology noise harassment, the voice of God weapons, which are the V2K, voice to skull, which was figured out by the CIA and the MK Ultra back in 1976. So 40 years we've had this V2K, voice to skull, voice of God weapon. We've used it elsewhere in the world, in Afghanistan and Iraq. We've used it in cults, or the CIA has used it in cults, to get these Manchurian channelers. Yeah. Like Elizabeth Cady over at Fendhorn, who's channeling all these books, and probably Helen Schuckman at Columbia, who channeled psychology professor who channeled what's the name of the Course in Miracles?
Course in Miracles,
yeah. Okay, so gangstalking is criminal. It's unconstitutional. Americans need to recall that we own this country. Here's what another sign I put up in Little Crestone: don't be a gang-stalking dupe, because some of my neighbors, I know these people. I see them driving up and down the road, with 5 miles an hour flashing light on top of a kind of a citizen fire department volunteer, and a local police volunteer. They're thinking they're doing good things, They're believing that, their neighbor is some kind of pedophile or terrorist, or maybe they didn't do their laundry appropriately or whatever. So it is a criminal felony in all 50 states. Every one of these people should be locked up in jail. That's including our local police who are organizing it or taking grants from Department of Homeland Security. And I took these little figures off of fightgangstalking.com. I think maybe you can see them. This kind of shows the components of the gang-stalking system. Very Nazi-oriented. America's post-constitutional law enforcement paradigm. Here's the Constitution being burned. Here's Nazis invading Poland. Here's a Nazi doing Sig Heil, blind obedience to authority. The National Security Agency, the CIA, LEIU, Law Enforcement Intelligence Unit, and they think they're really cool because they're cooperating, with the CIA. And now they get to play spy versus spy against the bad guy, see? And the bad guy is their local neighbor.
Right.
These guys are just scum, East German Stasi. Now there's the U.S. military counterintelligence agent. A lot of retirees will jump into this, as I say. Retirement to make more money in the private sector, doing this with InfraGard and other outfits. Intelligence security contractors, that's your local spook, and I can name them here. There's the target, that's you, and there's when they miss the target.
Right.
And then over here, a hypersonic sound device, surveillance role players, and these are the dupes on the street, aka brown nosers, sewer rats, and cockroaches. I like these terms because after a while you get to realize, I got to tell you, and then a wall of silence surrounds gangstalking. I got to tell you, as my own personal experience, a lot of these people, not all of them, but you can tell who they are. They have this look on their face. It's kind of a sneer, like that.
Yeah.
Like that. It's like they're tasting something really bad.
Right.
And my own interpretation is they have been thoroughly Satanized, either by being victims of this program, or they were used in this program because they'd been already thoroughly Satanized in some other capacity, because this is a satanic program.
Absolutely.
From top to bottom. This is totally satanic. And of course, it is also one of the best books. Let me put this again, another guy, AK Forwood, probably probably a pseudonym, but it's called Gangstalking and Mind Control, the Destruction of Society Through Community Spying Networks. This guy has been on both ends of it too. I think he's deceased at the moment. I think he was killed a couple of years ago. But you can get this book short on Lulu. And this tells you the satanic nature of it. Also tells you the practical nature of it, how to fight back. Fight Gangstalking also gives you tips on how to fight back. For instance, if you're in a situation where you're being gangstalked and you know it, just go up to the individual, according to fightgangstalking.com, smile and say, I read that all gangstalkers are brown nosers. Do you think that's true? And then, they're tightly scripted, so yeah. They're going to go, And then you say, scripted, well, it's just a theory, and then you walk off. In other words, that's all you say to these people. In other words, that at least gives you, the satisfaction of letting them know that you know what's going on, right. And then it's not wrecking your life,
Right.
I've digressed from that strip myself, when I've known that I'm being gangstalked and said different things. I've even handed out some of this literature to them. Did you hear about gangstalking? Here's a great bumper sticker, says fightgangstalking.com. Right. Look up this website. I know these people are, were called up to harass me. And so I just go right up to them, and because, again, they're fairly tightly scripted. Here's an example off of the Fight Gangstalking website. Public safety notice, gangstalking. This should be in every community in America. I think it's probably much worse in big cities because easier to flood the place with gangstalkers. It says this neighborhood has ongoing gangstalking activity known as organized stalking. The crime is not related to street gangs. Rather, it involves illegal surveillance and harassment of targeted individuals by multiple perpetrators, or called perps or brown nosers, working together. Often the stalking is done for vengeance or to silence potential whistleblowers. Perpetrators who manage organized stalking operations are usually associated with private security intelligence firms, or they are corrupt members or former members of the law enforcement community or criminal informants. Tactics include threats and abusive comments, breaking into the victim's residence, slander, lying about the victim, harassment by noise, et cetera, et cetera. And then it says tapping phone lines, hacking computers, and, these are violations of laws. There's the California Penal Code, sections 630, 638, and equivalents in all the other states. If people are falsely impersonating a law enforcement personnel, as I gave you the example in that YouTube video, that's violation of California Penal Code section 538B. Stalking, maliciously following, harassing, and threatening another person is a violation of California Penal section 646.9 and may be punishable by up to 3 years in state prison. We got the law on our side.
You're right.
But the problem is that the law enforcement people are on the other side.
Right, that's right.
Let me just give you a few of the resources that I have in my own library to try and stay sane and stay alive. This, again, Gangstalking and Mind Control, this short, this is great. He says, a secret underground lurks throughout society, a sophisticated network of secret policing units that are cropping up in every community. It is made up of people from all walks of life who are operating as a fascist, secret police force against all freedom-loving citizens of the Western world. They pretend to be serving a good cause, but they are creating terror in our neighborhoods and destroying lives one person at a time. The secret network is not only used for targeting individuals with systematic harassment, but those within it are often involved in sexual exploitation, blackmail, satanism, and mind control. And I've even heard this guy saying this is connected to the white slavery industry and the pedophile industry and the porn industry as well. 1978, the private sector, George O'Toole, Rent-A-Cops, private spies, and the police industrial complex, 1978. He said half of the million police in the United States in 1978 had not sworn to uphold the Constitution or defend Americans. In other words, they're private contractors. That's 1978. And then protectors of privilege, by Frank Donner, Red Squads and Police Repression in Urban America. These are mostly recommended on the fightgangstalking.com website. LA Secret Police inside the LAPD Elite Spy Network. Top Secret America, The Rise of the New American Security State by Dana Priest and William Arkin. Remote Brain Targeting by Renee Pittman, a compilation of historical information derived from various sources. Covert Technological Murder, also by Renee Pittman. Big Brother Approved. This by Dr. John Hall, a physician. A New Breed, Satellite Terrorism in America, talking about satellite harassment through electronics. And he has been targeted, and his lady friend was targeted, wrecked their relationship.
Sure.
The Watchers, The Rise of America's Surveillance State by Shane Harris. This one's good. The Hidden Evil, The Financial Elite's Covert War Against the Civilian Population by Mark M. Rich. Closing the Gap, Gangstalking, Community Notifications, The System Awareness Registry, Citizen Informants by G.M. B. Bailey. Spies for Hire, The Secret World of Police Outsourcing by Tim Sharrock. The Snitch Culture, 1999 or 2000, How Citizens Are Turned into the Eyes and Ears of the State. That's really good. I got a little insight. According to this book, you know the story of Ruby Ridge and Randy Weaver, who was shot by the FBI. The FBI also shot his wife and kid. According to this, the FBI, because he was a former special operations guy from the military, they expected him to spy on his neighbors. And he said, to hell with that, I'm not going to spy on my neighbors. And then they framed him and shot him.
Yeah.
So it really comes back down to you're going to cooperate because you were in the military. That's that story anyway.
Right.
Blackwater, The Rise of the World's Most Powerful Mercenary Army. Of course, they were the contractor that went into Iraq, the private contractor that made fortunes on the war in Iraq of 2003 of George W. Bush. The Rise of the Warrior Cop, The Militarization of America's Police Forces. And then lastly, A Government of Wolves, The Emerging American Police State, John W. Whitehead. So it's not a question of, maybe we're going to have a police state. We have a police state.
Right.
And now the question is, what can we do about it to defend ourselves? So I think I'll stop there. I've given you kind of the outline of it. And again, there's a heck of a lot more information about this on the 7 posts that I have on my 911nwo.com website. So for your listeners who want to research this for free, I'm not charging anything. I'm trying to educate people. The more people know about this and the more people stand up to it. Personally, I think this means the end of American society. Because once America wakes up to this, it's game over. If Americans are awake enough to take back their country. Because this is intolerable. And this, of course, led to the downfall of East Germany, the Soviet Union, and the repressive dictatorships in Hungary and Poland and Portugal. So once American people realize the degree of criminality of our watchers, our protectors, who's going to watch the watchers, then things are going to change. And again, that might be, of course, they are trying to instigate a race war and a civil war. So this could be a component of that. There's a heck of a lot of guns in America. And, it's a kind of a debate about who would win in a standoff between the military and the population. I'll go with the population every day,
Right.
If it's awake. And so that's my goal, is to wake up the population. Gang stalking, organized stalking, counterintelligence stalking is treating us, the American people, as the enemy. And it is trying to kill us. And our self-defense is going to have to be very vigorous. In other words, it's not a matter of survival. We have to counterattack. And that's why I want to get on every radio show I can get on to give out the information. Because, Goebbels, the German propaganda minister under Hitler, said the truth is the greatest enemy of the state.
Right.
And what we have is a state, criminal state, and truth is their greatest enemy. So, guys like Alex Jones, even Donald Trump seems to be talking some truth.
Right.
Truth is our best weapon.
Right.
I'm not, for pulling out a gun and shooting one of these dupes, or these brown nosers, but I am for embarrassing them and thwarting them. I've got a bumper sticker on my truck that says gangstalking is murder. I've got another one that says gangstalkers go to hell. I've got another one that says Department of Homeland Terrorism, and another one that says Department of Homeland Spying.
Right.
And I drive my Ford F-150 truck around, and people see these bumper stickers, and I put these notices up. So I'm sure that I'm red flagged in many ways. I have been a target for many years, and I could tell some stories, but I don't know how fruitful that is, but I can give impressions. Maybe that's more fruitful. So I'll stop there, Paul, and if you want to launch off into a particular direction that you're fascinated by, let's do that.
Well, I'm totally fascinated by the subject. And I think there's a massive awakening now. We had a Brexit vote where people in the UK were awake enough to try to push out of that. I don't know whether they're going to get out. We had the DNC where the Bernie supporters, as much as I'm not a Bernie supporter, protested, walked out, changed their shirts so they would glow, do what they could to stand out, and then they banned them, and they had to hire people to fill up the seats. So I think we are in a great awakening, especially in the Western culture, and I think your idea of a counterattack is the only way to go. I read a quote the other day that no campaign has ever been won on the defense. You've got to have the offense, and I think Bernie supporters, as much as I'm not a Bernie supporter, they did take the offense, and I think when people find out about this gang stalking, I mean, we used to look at Cuba, and everybody used to say that 1 out of 3 Cubans is working for the government, watching everybody else. And then we have the social justice warriors who are patrolling our language, cutting down the words that we can use because they might be offensive. I mean, the whole thing is ganging up on logical, rational people. And I think what's happening is we're waking up and moving back. And I think knowing about gang stalking has got to be the next step because they're doing it to a vast percentage of us. And the people they're not doing it to are probably working for them. So what do we really need to know, other than the fact that it's a government-wide program, it's on all different levels, individual security agencies are working for it, and they're spying on us. If we could get to the people who are doing it, who are unwittingly duped into doing this, go ahead.
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why I have, you after a while you get kind of bored with the whole thing, and you think, well, I'll try this and I'll try that,
Right.
And you have to kind of take the offensive a little bit. So I would go up and hand out a leaflet, that gang stalking is going on in our community, and of course I'll nail these around our town too. Usually come down in several days, but then I go back 2 weeks later and put it up again, and. I'm sure that this has ruffled some feathers, including the local police. However, again, what they're doing is illegal, unconstitutional, immoral, and, lawsuits need to happen.
Right.
Individuals need to be identified, named, and lawsuits need to happen. Now, I have sent my gang stalking action pack to our local county commissioners. I have written letters on this, not complaining about my own situation, but complaining about this phenomenon. And I've gone to some of our local county commissioners' meetings, and I intend to go to some more. This was the recommendation of one of the guys who did a nice YouTube on this. And he's saying, yeah, this is coming from Department of Homeland Security grants to your local county and your local police force, and to at least a large extent. And yes, they are using the local first responders, and yes, they are getting money for it. And if you have a poor county like Saguache County where I live, you know, they're always attracted. By the way, I had this little cut, I guess I showed you, no big deal. But I went to a community clinic in Alamosa yesterday, and because they're government funded, I could not believe the number of questions that were asked of me that had nothing to do with my cut.
Whoa.
So
Like
this is what has happened with these government grants infiltrating. Now we have the federalization, dictatorship really, of the local and community and state level. And really this is what we're fighting. A criminal federal government with tentacles into all branches. Now, that said, it's not always just the government. It's and a private individual with means could target an individual with this technology, because there are so many private contractors out there. They just get on the phone and say, okay, take him out or take her out or discredit him or whatever. And, you know, Maurice Strong, we've talked about, is the guy who wrote Agenda 21 for the United Nations, presided over the Rio Earth Summit of, 1992 and 2012, Rio Plus 20, and wants to redesign the whole world's economy with Agenda 21, Agenda for the 21st Century, now called Agenda 2030, in which you get this vertical integration between the upper levels up to the UN and down to the local community level. That's local Agenda 21. So you could say that there's a lot of overlap between what's going on here and Agenda 21, and that the Gangstalking might be a way to enforce this Agenda 21. Now, of course, global warming is just the centerpiece of that bogus political restructuring, which involves, you know, vast depopulation of the world's population and deindustrialization of the industrial countries, the pouring of Europe and America, et cetera. This is the goal, and lots of statements by Maurice Strong and others prove that. Isn't it our, you know, to save the earth, isn't it our responsibility to destroy the industrial economies? I mean, and this guy doesn't have a high school diploma. He doesn't know squat about science. He doesn't know squat about global warming. He doesn't know squat about climate change. But he does have a communist political agenda, which is wrapped in an environmental religion. And of course, we're in Crestone here, where we have many, many different religions and cults. Well, a guy like Maurice Strong, who actually in the 70s was with Canadian International Development Agency, CEDA, had a whole network of spies in Africa, top to bottom. And he's a protege of the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. So here's one guy, billionaire through gas and oil and water and all kinds of robber baron kind of shenanigans, start a company here, you know, bankrupt it there, make money here, blah, blah, blah. Using the environmental movement as a front for this political agenda of one world government, basically. He could do it. And if the man is still alive, he might have every incentive to you know, throw out a $500,000 and say, get Eric Karlstrom, because he's got a website about, it's called Water Watch Alliance, and it's all about the water issues in the San Luis Valley. And by golly, Maurice Strong and his American Water Development Incorporated tried to take that water, this guy from Canada, take that water and make $1 billion by selling it over to Denver. Well, we're into a level of lawlessness here that most people can't even conceive. These Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Maurice Strong, this strata, committee of 300, believe they're completely above the law. And they've made it stick, you know. So it could be a private individual that is, you know, wanting to target certain individuals. But bottom line, it's global. Since 9/11, the CIA, the FBI, the local police, all the intelligence agencies, the alphabet soup, 19 of them or whatever, the walls have come down. And now we have these fusion centers and this huge Utah data center over near Salt Lake City, where all of our emails and all of our phone calls are stored. And this stuff can be coordinated. And some people envision that, you know, hey, in a few years, this whole program could be administrated by one guy on his workstation, you know, with computers and directed energy weapons, you know. So I don't know that we have all that much time to expose this and get people held accountable with lawsuits and publicizing. You know, these people that write these books, they're pretty brave. They get themselves out there. But that's what we need. We need people to stand up and say,
right.
This is America. We have a constitution.
Right.
You're breaking all the laws, and you go to jail for
right.
doing that. Now, I read, and the blacks are heavily targeted. I did a little interview with Deanna Spingola in which I mentioned Gangstalking, and I got some letters from, I think it was a lady, no, it didn't sign it, out of Sacramento, signed it Black Lives Matter. And she said, you know, our community is heavily targeted with Gangstalking, blacks. Well, of course, if you want to institute a race war.
Right. You've got to control it.
Target the blacks, and they've always targeted blacks for mind control because they're deemed more expendable. The CIA has targeted blacks right from the beginning with the Tuskegee syphilis experiments,
right.
et cetera. You know, I mean, you know, we're supposed to have this race war with the blacks, but what I see is that a lot of the blacks have woken up a lot more than the whites,
right.
because they have been targeted for longer. And there's one black lady who I adore, you know, she gets on the YouTube and she said, well, look at what I've got here. This is a release form that the cops make the perpetrator sign before they go out and do their gangstalking, which releases the police of all responsibility if that perpetrator is killed by the person they're targeting. Well, of course, this is to drive people crazy.
Right.
So a certain percentage are going to fight back and kill or harm their stalkers. And so now you have a form that this lady found, I think is in Pennsylvania, in which the police department is actually getting their perpetrators to sign this release form saying that if you're hurt, we're not responsible. Now, I guess I could use the word chicken shit. You know, these people are, you know, I mean, obviously they're following, you know, orders. They're following, all these things are hierarchical.
Right.
There's a script, you know, do this, do this, do this, and you get some money. But, you know, and make them sign this and make them sign that. But it's so outrageous that you'd think people would wake up. You know?
Well, it doesn't. You see, I think everybody thinks that if I'm not doing anything wrong, I don't have to worry about anything. And
right.
Boy, that's as effective as the old calling someone a conspiracy theorist. Because when you say, well, I'm not doing anything wrong, you know, it's people like Paul Marco and Eric Karlstrom that are targeted because they're trying to disrupt the whole government. Well, it's not. It's you're being surveilled all the time. There's no privacy now. And if you start deviating from the general line of thinking, you're going to be looked at and targeted. I think, Eric, could you try to bring it home to the average person? You're an average guy. Well, you're a highly educated average academician who's decided to do something very courageous. And I'm sure you thought about it a lot before you got into this. How did this happen to you? You know, what I want to do, I want to try to make it so they could see that we're no different than they are. Yeah? And this happens to normal people. Can you give us a story or how this...
Give you my story. Well,
yeah, that's good.
I think my story is, I don't really understand my story completely. But I grew up in the DC area, and my dad and my uncle were very close. Both worked for the U.S. government. Okay. One with the CIA, and my dad with the U.S. Geological Survey.
Yeah.
Okay. I would have been born in 1949 and grown up during the 50s. Okay, what was going on in 1949 in the 50s? Allen Dulles was the head of the CIA.
Right.
And I did a long extended piece on my website about Allen Dulles, kind of the rest of the story. And Allen Dulles, who was a Wall Street lawyer, along with his brother John Foster Dulles, bragged that he controlled President Eisenhower. And I'm sure he did.
Yes.
And so what you had is you had Wall Street, which, of course, Rockefeller, it's really the Rockefeller, Harriman, Bush, Dulles faction that controlled not only American policy, but all these coups all over the world during the 50s and 60s and 70s, et cetera, and right to the present. So we have this push towards one world government that's coming out of Wall Street, connected to the City of London, and the Nazis come out of that nexus, because this nexus of Wall Street and the City of London, the international bankers, created the Soviet Union with the Bolshevik Revolution and presided over that hellish nightmare state. Their people did for 70 years. They also created Nazis, the Nazi as an occult group, in order, again, to foment wars that are very profitable, etc. But more than that, to bring in the Superman.
Right.
That was what Hitler was all about, bringing in this, I would have to say, satanic Superman, which does involve the mind control and Joseph Mengele and the fracturing of the personalities by trauma-based mind control of children, which the Illuminati families, the bloodlines, have been doing for eons.
Right.
This is how they control their own. So you would have a front personality, which may or may not be co-conscious with all these subalter personalities in your subconscious. And then if they need a super soldier, or need a beautiful woman to seduce somebody, or to somebody to gather information with a photographic memory, these subalterns have been programmed and can be triggered by handlers. So the U.S. government got into that in the 40s and 50s and 60s, and it still is. And of course, that story is told in The Bourne Identity. But again, there's a twist on it. In The Bourne Identity, he volunteered. Well, these people don't volunteer.
Right.
When they're raped, they're less than 6 years old.
Right.
And that's how the trauma-based mind control gets started. That's one of the many ways. And the child, in order to survive, has to split off another personality. That's the only way they can survive this trauma.
Right.
After 6, the individuals subjected to great trauma have, shell shock or post-traumatic stress disorder, we call it now, PTSD. But less than 6, you split off another personality, and then if there's a programmer or a handler right there, they can name it, they can give it an identity, they can even insert a demon.
Right.
If you read, they can insert an animal spirit, a wolf spirit or something. I mean, it's crazy. You can't believe this stuff. But I do have a whole 60-page article about the history and the applications of mind control. It took me a year to write that. And after I finished that and posted it, I knew that Satan exists.
Yes.
Before that, I was sort of agnostic. But this sort of activity could not be done without an extremely malevolent spirit or spirits involved. Human beings would not do this to each other under normal conditions.
I agree.
So anyway, my story is that I grew up in the D.C. area at the time when the MK Ultra stuff was just getting started. That was 1953. I don't know, between 0 and 6, most people have fuzzy memories. I don't think I was a subject.
Right.
But my uncle was in the CIA, and those were the relatives of the children and the relatives of military and intelligence people were the ones who then became the rock stars over in Laurel Canyon.
Sure.
That's the story that Dave McGowan told. Most of these kids would have been subject to this kind of mind control abuse training, and then would have been made famous and used for a while. And then if their programming starts to go haywire, like maybe Jimi Hendrix did at the age of 27, and maybe Jim Morrison at 27, and Tim Buckley at 31, and then Cass Elliot, she had to go for whatever reason.
Right.
So a lot of these people died early after they had a meteoric rise to fame, supported by the whole military intelligence, press, media, entertainment industry. So I mean, that's how coordinated it was back in the 60s.
Right.
It's very coordinated now. So anyway, my story is I come out of that. We moved to Arizona when I was in high school because Dad was going to help map the moon because he was a geologist. And then I, tried to live a normal life, went through college, became a professor. And as far as I can tell, I'm, fairly highly functioning. But and when the Gangstalking started, I think maybe some of the powers that be did not want me to get my PhD or finish my master's.
Oh, back that far?
Yeah, back in the 70s. And I think that it was considered by some people in the intelligence community that it would not be a good idea if I went into this field. In other words, that is how controlled At least parts of our environment are. And, I could tell you story after story about, being denied tenure here, not actually denied tenure, but an attempt, and being kind of squeezed out of this university because my father and I were there together, maybe considered too strong a power block, because we actually understood climate change between the two of us. He put in a whole career on it, and so did I. And, I was eased out of Northern Arizona University, this kind of thing. And I can tell you all the story. I don't know if I'll ever get around to writing it, but it's not a happy one. Is it early harassment? That's 86.
Right.
And then in the 90s, same thing at Cal State University. Well, I'm not a bad professor, so for whatever reason, I was being targeted even within the university.
Right.
But I persevered. And then after leaving, and then experiences at the university told me I'm being watched. And then after leaving, it's gotten, anywhere I go, could be North Carolina, could be Texas, wherever I go, there's going to be some evidence of that kind of coordinated activity. Not always hostile, sometimes just watching, sometimes just, a honey trap. Pretty girl over here with a guy, a good old boy from Texas in a truck over here watching,
Right.
And she's the bait, and I'm supposed to, fall for it and blah, blah, blah. These kinds of setups, not uncommon. And I probably give you half a dozen of those over the last 4 years, all of which seem to have, this guy in the background watching.
Right. So
and sometimes military out of Albuquerque, because a lot of this is coming from ex-military, SAIC. I mean, these are the guys that did 911.
Right.
These are the guys that did the directed energy weapons that brought down 911. Well, yeah, they've got every incentive to squash legitimate queries about 911, especially from an academic who can actually understand perhaps what happened.
Yes.
And in 2002, you asked me about, my experience. In 2002, I wrote a 50-page paper, academic style, reflections on the origins of 911, 3 scenarios. And first scenario, Osama bin Laden did it.
Right.
Easy to disprove that. Second scenario, it's blowback. We've done so many bad things over in the Middle East that they finally got ticked off and they attacked us.
Right.
You can easily disprove that. The Muslims didn't have much to do with it.
Right.
It was mostly the third, which is that it's an inside job. And then the nuance to that is we have various fifth column groups in America that have commandeered our highest levels of military and government. So, yes, America did it. Yes, American service people did it. But who controls America?
Right.
And then, of course, that's a big part of my website. Who controls America? And that also is fairly easy to demonstrate. And you got your Nazis and you got your international bankers for sure. And, you've got the Wall Street connection and you've got the Illuminati bloodlines and all those things, America is not controlled by its own citizens anymore. And so therefore, with these lies, they have to keep us in the dark with all these lies. 911 was done by Osama bin Laden, or in a few years later it's Saddam Hussein, or a few years later now it's Saudi Arabia. Oh, that's bullshit. I mean, sorry, the United States government or the highest levels were integrally involved. Likewise, the global warming thing, easy to disprove. So in terms of my own experience, things have ramped up in the last, since I retired in 2011. And during the last several months, I think directed energy weapons have been applied to me in my home. And I've been sick as a dog, all of a sudden with, multiple symptoms that don't make sense, and I'm flat on my back and can't water the plants, So things that don't make sense. Well, that does make sense if you consider that, there's a standard progression there's a sequence that occurs with targeted individuals, and you eventually work up to being assaulted with directed energy weapons, And so this is standard, and you get quotes from other people, you read books, and you realize that a lot of us are being subject to the same kinds of, it's a program. You can call it the program. Right. And you can say that who's directing it is the cult.
Right.
And it is a satanic cult. So it is vertically integrated right from street level to the highest Illuminati bloodlines.
Right.
And it is satanic. And it is a way not only to control the targeted individuals, but also the perps.
Right.
Because they will also be threatened. If you don't do this right, you could be targeted.
Right. And you're
So it's a total control system. This is Orwell and Brave New World coming true in a dystopian tyranny in the greatest country the world's ever seen, a free country, supposedly the United States of America.
And your biggest crime is the fact that you're bright, articulate, and can do research.
Yeah, and then I put it out there. Like I say, when I wrote this paper in 2002, Reflections on the Origins of 911, there was a big debate. Should I put my name on it or not?
Right.
Because there was so much fear at that time, most people didn't. But I decided I'm going to put my name on it because it gives it more impact.
Right, it does.
It said Dr. Eric T. Karlstrom, Department of Geography, California State University, Stanislaus.
Right.
This is who I am. This is where I'm from. I've been a professor X number of years. And therefore, maybe take this a little seriously. It has big, long bibliography of references, So using the standard academic style, I would be one of the few academics who was not put in this box of, okay, I'm just going to do this.
Right.
Of course, geography is a fairly broad synthetic field anyway. And they even say geography is what geographers do. And it can be human geography, it can be physical geography, and it can bleed over from one to the next.
Sure.
So in that sense, I had a lot of, quote, latitude
Right.
to move towards the political realm. Because we have political geographers, we have economic geographers, we have, cultural geographers. I'm a physical geographer, but I've moved into these realms because I think it's critical. Our government can't be, it's scaring people with terrorism. Deception and terrorism is, you go back to the Old Testament. That's how you control people, deception
Right.
and terror. And there's nothing new about it. That's what they did in the Soviet Union. That's what they did the Nazis, and go right on back through history. Well, that's all being applied in America, the land of the free right now.
Yeah. Well,
And now, that's not to say that all military and police people are bad. There's a heck of a lot of good ones, I think. But there's also a lot of them that are going to go along with the program.
sure.
Percentage.
So you've got all your various groups managed in various different ways. You've got the satanic control system, and if there's any question of that, my God, you have to look at the top two presidential candidates. One worships Apollo, which is Lucifer. The other's a witch, and they're probably the two most corrupt people, both associated with pedophilia. So it's a satanic control system. So they control most of the people with TV. They keep them asleep, and as long as they don't do anything, they can be so asleep that they can be involved in perpetrating the gang stalking. You've got another bunch of people who are mind controlled from the jump. They're MK Ultra, and I would say that. I don't know, a large percentage of people, because there's not only MK Ultra mind control, we also go into cloning and all other ways of controlling people, showing them in different ways. You've got the whole entertainment industry and politics, and if they're not controlled directly satanically, they're controlled through bribes. Pedophilia is a good way to control people. And then there's the people who are waking up and trying to do something. They're trying to move forward, like you are. The other one that always talks about gang stalking is Lorraine Murray. I don't know whether you know who that is.
I've interviewed her a couple times. Yeah.
She's an amazing woman. We'll always talk about gang stalking and what happened to her that week. And she's been hit many times, she's told on interviews, by directed energy weapons. Sometimes I think we are here, but it's another topic. So,
well, again, satellite. It's possible from satellites. That means no place on the Earth is out of reach.
We've got cell towers all around here. They could, I mean, at any moment. So that's the control system for the people that are waking up. And I guess the only way to try to beat that is be offensive. We've got to wake people up to what gangstalking is. Try to get people not to do that, so that maybe there's a critical mass once you get so many people that are awakened to gangstalking and how to avoid it and what it's doing to their lives, the children's lives, and everything. So that's why I thought that we could really try to make it as vivid as we can, because people have to realize, unless they're sound asleep, and if they're watching this, they're not sound asleep. If they're
Right.
interested in gangstalking and they know me or they know you, they're not sound asleep. So if those people can be aware of gangstalking and start talking it up. For me, before we started this interview, actually it was kind of a nebulous thing. Who's doing it? What are they doing? How can they hurt you? But I think you've, just through your last hour of talking, made it really real for me. And I hope we've made it real for everybody watching. Because this is it. This is how they're going to control you as you wake up.
Yes, and not only that, one of the first, in fact, I've got on my website, if people are interested in going to my 911nwo.com website, they can look under three main categories. One is New World Order, one is New World Religion, ? And another one's called The Controllers. And they can look and they can see that I have an Appendix 29, Appendix 9, and then an Appendix 20, an Appendix 23, and then I've got another one called Follow the Money, another one called the CIA Tavistock, and the Global Intelligence Police Gestapo State. And I got a whole bunch of quotes from victims of gangstalking. Excuse me for a second.
Okay, hold on.
I just hung up there, Paul.
Okay, if they don't call back, we're cool.
No, I know who it is, so I'll call them. But, so the gangstalking quotes people who are victims of this, and you get a sense of what it is. But in my Appendix 9, which is the first one I put together, I quoted extensively a woman named Julianne McKinney. Julianne McKinney was an intelligence officer herself. And she's very articulate. She's written a book about directed energy weapons and gangstalking. And I've actually got that interview on my Appendix 9 posted there. And what she says is that this could be the technique, or she says this will be the technique that they use to genocide the population of the world. In other words, we could be looking at a mass genocide event using these technologies. Again, it's a whole series of, bag of tricks that includes mind control and harassment, surveillance, right up to directed energy. And of course, the directed energy, the non-lethal weapons, has the potential, through HARP and other things like that, to destroy the vast majority of the human race. So, yeah, I'd say this is kind of important.
Right.
And if people don't even know what's going on, I think fear is a big part of it. Again, I look at my own family. They're busy doing their own things. They don't want to know about this.
Right.
My own family. You can't talk to them about this.
Same with us.
And of course, they do want to isolate you from your family. They want to isolate you from your friends, all to, make you more apt to commit suicide or be easier to take out. Now, Dave McGowan, the guy who wrote that great book on the weird scenes of Laurel Canyon, he died of a fast onset cancer within the last year or so. But I looked at his interviews. It sounded like he had been atomized and isolated.
Yes.
In other words, there's the kind of guy who's a threat to the system. He figured out what's going on, and he wrote a book which got very popular.
Right.
So he then became an enemy of the state in somebody's list,
right,
some notification list, and then was, I would say, murdered. I'd say his murder is his blood is on the hands on the hands of our national security state, our Gestapo Stasi police state.
Right.
Or a private contractor, could be Infraguard. See, it's all nebulous, you know. But I would say he's murder. And this is not acceptable. This is completely not acceptable. There needs to be an accounting. There needs to be a trial. There needs to be a. Now I can tell you a story. Have you ever heard of Judy Berry?
Judy Berry? No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, back in I guess it would be the 90s, she was an environmental activist in California. Quite, she was a fiddle player, and her partner was Dale Cherney, who played guitar. And they wrote lots of songs, and they went from campus to campus and, sang about the redwoods and tried to radicalize the students. Mm-hmm. And evidently they were having some success because the FBI put a bomb in her car.
Wow.
And it blew up when she got in it, and she was crippled, not killed, but she died a few years later. Anyway, the trial was in Oakland, California. She was from the Bay Area, and I lived in Turlock, Central Valley. So I went to her trial one day, and there were the FBI guys at the front, suits, flat top haircuts, look, perfect Nazi types. And Judy Berry's, she's pretty obnoxious, in your face. She's but they killed her, they bombed her. Right. And those guys, I think they got away with it, because they had the good lawyers. So again, FBI took out 28 Black Panthers in the 60s with the COINTELPRO. Right. It's 28-0. FBI 28, Black Panthers 0. Right. Well, it was doing this kind of setup thing, doing these dirty tricks against individuals to neutralize them and eventually kill them. Right. So this program has legs in our country that goes way back, 100 years. But the idea that a citizen becomes inconvenient and the state's going to take them out, totally unacceptable, illegal, unconstitutional, and immoral.
Right.
And these are elected officials, many of whom swear to uphold the Constitution.
That's right.
So they're lying bastards,
Right.
The ones who are involved.
You've got Hillary is just in the last 2 months, I think it was June, July, took out 5 people who were writing things about her past.
Right.
I mean, it still happens right now. I mean, they just send them out and they're gone.
Yeah, there's a big trail of bodies beyond the Clintons and certainly the Bushes.
Right.
Because they're all ganged up, the Bushes and the Clintons. But yeah, this is huge. We're dealing with a mafioso. I got wise to this pretty quick. I was in the D.C. area when John F. Kennedy was shot. I was 14. And I would glance at the, Washington Post and read about such and such a witness who was going to testify tomorrow, died in a car wreck or, had a heart attack or whatever. It was about 50 bodies that and you even if you're 14, you figure out there's a pattern there.
Right.
In other words, this was a mafia-style hit too. And now the cover-up,
Right.
And these are coups, the JFK coup and the 9/11 coup. These are incremental takeovers of the United States.
Right. Let me mention another thing. You mentioned gaslighting, and gaslighting is an amazing phenomenon. That's where you try to convince somebody that they're crazy. And the reason I think that this is important, I think that, I know from the feedback that a lot of people are waking up. They come to Pinecone Utopia, our site, and they can get some information from you, other interviews or things that I've said. And as they awaken, they're going to realize that the mainstream media and mainstream thought is going to try to gaslight them. Now, gaslight them, try to make them think that they're crazy. Well, first of all, they'll call them a conspiracy theorist, which is, that's a well-designed term started by the CIA under Hoover, the Kennedy administration, to make people who disagreed with the normal way seem like they're nuts. But that's the whole role of mainstream media in terms of the awakening community, to try to convince our families, our kids, that we're crazy because we're waking up. It's a gaslighting function. I would even consider it gangstalking at a media level to try to make us less credible. But it's an amazing thing that's happening now. So we're all, go ahead. Aaron.
Yeah, and in that regard, I mean, I've done a lot of writing about the New World Religion, and a whole series on my 911nwo.com site entitled "Is Crestone Baca Where I Live?"
Right.
Founded more or less by Maurice Strong and his wife, these international figures. Is Crestone Baca the Vatican City of the New World Order, an expose of the New World Religion? Well, we've got like over 30 spiritual groups, from all over the world.
Right.
We're kind of an interfaith utopia, if you will.
Right.
But basically, I went through, part 1 through, I think, 12 now, and then some 30 appendices. I think part 4 or 5, I think it's part 5, it talks about some of the think tanks and what they did in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. One of them was the Macy conferences, the Mind Machine conferences set up by Gregory Bates, who's an anthropologist out of Britain who worked with the CIA during World War II. He married Margaret Mead, another anthropologist, and it was a very small interdisciplinary group that did these famous Macy conferences. But basically, Gregory Bateson's goal was to figure out how to produce symptoms that mimicked schizophrenia. In other words, how to make people look crazy through external circumstances and behavior that is not crazy, but would make the public or the press or the police or whatever. So just as you say, there's been an enormous amount of attention given to our media system and our propaganda system, how to drive people crazy or make it seem like they're crazy or crazy enough so that they're discredited. So I'm totally agreeing with your point. And that these psychological techniques are embedded into our government media system. And I'm sure they have a certain amount of success in driving a certain percentage of people crazy, because things are crazy out there, yeah.
I would imagine that's what social media is for. Yeah. Find out how successful they are, how many people are crazy now. But there's something that they're really censoring social media now. So maybe that role is becoming less important. If I wanted to know what was going on, I'd want to let the social media go and I'd watch it. I might try to control it one way or another, but I certainly wouldn't shut it down because I want to know where guys like Eric Karlstrom and Paul Marco are. Now they're even shutting that down. So I don't know whether that's a change in their strategy to gaslight us all, or I guess they're just shutting off our access to people.
Yeah, I'm not on social media per se. I don't have Facebook. I don't have a cell phone. I don't have anything like that. But of course, I have my websites. And you hear rumors, that they're going to shut down the internet or whatever. I hope that doesn't happen, but we'll see. Because as you say, the watchers get an enormous amount of information from these social media, so they benefit from it. Who's doing what, et cetera. People just seem to want to put themselves out there.
Right.
I was at the zoo this morning, and I saw my best friend, and and then I spilled my ice cream cone, and then blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
As if it matters,
Yeah.
But they've got all that data somewhere in Utah, at these at this data center, and who knows where it's going, but there's got to be pushback. We have to push back, and we have to be clever about it. We have to figure out how to convict these criminals, because we're dealing with a criminal operation. Again, unconstitutional, illegal, and immoral, violates at least 2 of the 10 commandments. And if you want to be part of that system, you're on the wrong side of the law. And yet there's got to be millions that are on that side of the system.
There's also got to be ways that we can, on an individual basis, push back. Like you're confronting your gang stalkers. I think that's really important. And recognizing when you've been hit by a directed energy weapon, you know. So.
Yeah. Well, when all of a sudden you can't make it to the bathroom because you fall down, right. Something's a little haywire.
Right.
I've climbed mountains all over the world, and I'm very strong still at my age. And if I can't make it, if I have to crawl to the bathroom, I know something's wrong.
Right. That's not normal. Well.
So this stuff is very serious. Things are coming to a head. I do believe, faith is important for me, and I think for many of the targeted individuals. Again, going back to the black ladies, that post, pray up, get right with God, get right with Jesus. You're really hanging on against some very powerful and formidable and malevolent forces.
Right.
So you've got to have something. I would suggest, maybe a lot of people can go it alone, but I would suggest that those of us who are inclined towards, say Christian faith, in my case, would be then forced into embracing it on a more daily basis, because a lot of times these events are on a daily basis.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, I think you need to realize that God is in charge, even though we're going through what seems to be horrendous times. That's always there in the back of my mind, and I always wanted to know. I always want to know why we're going through this, what's happening, what are we supposed to know, what's going on. But right now we're nose to nose, toe to toe with this, and I think we finally hit the lowest level of the battlefield. This gangstalking. This is grassroots. This affects all of us. As we awaken, as they gaslight us, as we get more effective at communicating with one another, great model is Eric, they're gonna try to control us. If they haven't done it through MK Ultra, if we weren't molested before we were 6, if we're not paid off by being an entertainer or a politician, and we're starting to wake up organically, this is how they're going to get us. And we have to stand up to it. And I think making people know what gaslighting it is how pervasive it is. It's happening all around us. A lot of the people that you see on YouTube that are legitimate alternative media are being gaslighted. A lot of the alternative media is not being gaslighted. I think that would tell you a lot. They're not harassed. They're showing a lot of things that I think are misleading. But anyway, that's another topic for another day. Eric, thank you very much for coming and talking to us. This is a critical subject. I'm going to do what I can to try to get this out and try to make it as popular as I can. This is the critical subject, I think, right now. I think you're exactly right. Do you want to sum up and then give your websites and stuff again? By the way, these websites are fantastic. They're so deep. You're going to be amazed. Go ahead, Eric. We want to sum up?
Well, thank you, Paul. It's always a pleasure to get a chance to compare notes and to talk about these things that we both recognize are absolutely critical issues. I would just refer people to my website, 911nwo.com. I've got 7 links now relating to gangstalking on that site. I also am, and of course, prove abundantly that 911 is an inside job. And of course, one of many, many, many false flag terror events that are meant to drive us into war and civil war. And we are being manipulated like puppets on a string of the intelligence agencies, including the CIA. My uncle was a member, and so I have an extra interest. He was a few doors down from Allen Dulles, who I have found out to be perhaps the greatest traitor in American history, and I name it that way in the article that I wrote about him. actually compiled from other books. I didn't really write much original. But anyway, 911nwo.com has the information about gangstalking. Naturalclimatechange.us is now being revised, and it's up as it is, but that gives a lot of information about the global warming fraud. You could look at the 911 and the global warming fraud as the two prongs of the pincers in the takedown of America. The 911, of course, is the pretext for all these wars in the Middle East and for setting up this incredible police state at home, and of course radically expanded defense budgets, etc. And then the global warming is kind of the centerpiece of the UN Agenda 21.
Right.
Let's completely redesign the political landscape so that the United Nations is the prototype world government. So you could say one is the hard path. That's the bomb the hell out of them approach,
Right.
is the 911. And then the soft, quote unquote, soft approach, the economic approach, is the global warming and the phony environmental movement of the UN. But then coming through behind the scenes in both of them, we now see this global gangstalking program. We can call it counterintelligence stalking. We can call it cause stalking, community-based stalking, vigilante stalking, organized gang stalking. Gang stalking is a little bit of a misnomer because we're not talking about street gangs here.
Right.
We're talking about very, very coordinated groups, often coordinated from local police, often from Homeland Security, private contractors. There is a network of individuals who are perpetrators, who can be called on. And I think these people are a lot of them are bottom feeders, maybe very poor. And maybe there's a little money involved in it for them, and maybe they get 15, 20, 40 calls a day from their superior who says, okay, there's going to be a blue van coming down the road and it's going to have these license plates. I want you to cut them off or whatever, So they're responding to one call for this TI and then another call for that TI. And this then becomes their livelihood. These perpetrators are brown noses. And then, of course, there are the people that are coordinating this. And the very, very, very top, according to Forwood on his excellent little book here, called Gangstalking and Mind Control. At the very top, we have the Illuminati, bloodline, Satanist families who are kind of behind the whole thing to give us a self-policing fascist totalitarian state. So we police ourselves. So people like Paul Marco and Eric Karlstrom don't venture out into these limbs, because it's too dangerous. Because if I do that, then, I could pay this price. So that would be where a lot of people are in America right now. It's like, I don't want to get involved because I don't want to be, I don't want anything bad to happen to me.
Right.
So this insular protective shell goes up. And I think that we're arguing that that's maybe counterproductive. We can see why people do it. Right. But people need to get a little more community minded and realize that what's happening in our communities is they're being people are being driven out of communities. I can tell you quite a few that have been driven out of Crestone. And I can give you quotes from people here. People are afraid to come out of their homes, one guy said. And he was a spy from back east. Well, guess what? Gangstalking would do that, wouldn't it?
Sure it would.
Drive you back into your home because that's the only place where you think you're safe.
Right.
And then, of course, if the directed energy weapons come, then you're not safe there either.
That's right.
So anyway, so this is a huge topic. I really appreciate you helping me get the word out. And again, anytime we can go deeper into this rabbit hole, I'll be glad to talk, in a certain amount of time to get another, talk about some of this other information that I have on the website. But anyway, I really appreciate your being willing and able to jump in on this issue, because I think it is of global significance. There's nowhere to hide.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to hide. That's I like to end it like that, because there is nowhere to hide. You can stay in your home. It's still happening. You've got to get out and do something. Yeah, and I think you have to be offensive. So thank you very much, Eric. It's been wonderful. We can do this anytime. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you so much. Thanks, Paul. You guys have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.